Hi guys, and welcome back to Tangy Tea of Life. I'm Veronica. My co-host Brittany is under the weather, so she's not here again tonight. We miss her so much, but we have a special guest tonight, Carron James. Hi, Carron.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So tonight, guys, we're going to be talking about child neglect. A lot of that is going on around here, around the area, around the world. So we just want to get a little feedback from Carron, a social worker. So she's going to tell us a little bit about things that we should be looking out for. But first we're going to start. Carron, explain to us what are the duties of social work, just in case someone out there is thinking about going in that field, or you know, just want to know more about what is the position of a social worker.
Well, to start off, social work is very, very broad. It's very broad. There's no one particular type of social worker. We have social workers that are in the medical field. We have social workers in the school system. There are social workers in the prison system. There are also social workers that work for the legal system. So social workers aren't just subjected or minimized to just one particular area. A social worker can expand his or her career in many, many different areas.
When we think about social workers, we think about someone going to individual houses, you know, like when there's a conflict within the house with a parent or a child, then we that's how we think of social work. Well, me personally, but your duties are different, right? Like, do you go to the homes?
Yeah, I actually do go to the homes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you get like a call or people, and I'm not going to get deep into what you really, you know, I'm just trying to get a better understanding of a social worker. So when you get that phone call, I guess from your office, your office, and you go directly to the home, or how does that work? Or you have to have a police report, or?
Okay, so this is how it works. There's different levels to how we get a report. I personally work in investigations, child protective services. First off, whenever someone calls in to make a report, there's an intake hub, or what many people would consider a call center. And so whenever someone makes that report, just to be clear, anyone can make a report. We have mandated reporters, which are your typical teachers, your nurses, doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, people pretty much that work in mental health. You have mandated reporters, and you also have just your general population. They can make reports as well. You call a number, which is, it goes to our intake hub. The intake hub will take down the report, whatever the allegations are that the person is concerned about. Whatever information that caller gives to the person on the other end of the phone, they document that information. And there's a certain system that it goes through that determines whether or not it needs an investigation. And in that case, if it does need an investigation, my department gets it, or someone like myself, an investigator, we get it. And once we get that report, we have a certain response time. And whatever that response time, whether it be we have to respond in 0 to 2 hours or 2 to 24 hours, we have to make contact with those children first, just to make sure that the children are safe. Once that report comes through, we make contact with them, we make contact with the family, and then we pretty much put in any type of safety measure that we need to put in to ensure the safety and the well-being of the children is maintained throughout the investigation.
Okay. That's some good info. Now, I get confused when it comes to child neglect and child abuse. Okay, those are two different things, right? When I think of child neglect, I'm thinking of someone that's neglecting their child, not feeding their child, not bathing their child, not you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then when I think of child abuse, I'm thinking of someone like physically abusing their child.
Yeah, and that's a big misconception. A lot of times when I make contact with my families, most people say, well, I'm not abusing my child. I don't neglect my child. Look at her. Look at how big she is, or look at how big he is. He's almost as big as my 4-year-old, and they could be referencing a 2-year-old. But there are different types of we call them maltreatments. Okay, so we have physical abuse, we have physical neglect, there is abandonment, There's also sexual abuse, and there's also let's see. Of course, my mind would jar while
That's
we're
okay.
on. But just to kind of give you the condensed version, there are different types of maltreatments. Okay, and then there are also subcategories, which means there's a substantial risk of the ones I mentioned. There's a substantial risk of sexual abuse, which means that the child is at a greater risk of being sexually abused because of whatever situation they may be in. And just to kind of make things plain. Physical neglect is you're failing to provide the child's basic needs. The basic needs are shelter, food, clothing, safety, like your lights, your water, just the basic thing any child needs, any person, any human being needs to thrive, to live. So that's pretty much what physical neglect is. You're not providing that child's basic needs. Okay? And then you have abandonment, which is pretty much self-explanatory. You don't want the child anymore, so you're going to leave the child in a facility, or you're going to leave the child on a doorstep, or you have some people that put children in garbage cans, things like that. That will be considered neglect. You have not made arrangements for that child over a certain length of time, according to the law. So say for instance abandonment, if you take your niece to your sister's house, okay, and you tell your sister you're going to come back in 2 days, okay, if you don't come back in a particular time over those 2 days, and you didn't make arrangements, you didn't contact, they don't know your whereabouts, then they can technically make a report for abandonment, because they don't know where you're at, they don't know what they're going to do with the child. Their normal day-to-day life has been interrupted because you can't locate the biological parent or the custodial parent. So that's pretty much what abandonment would be. But there are different categories of child abuse and neglect, and for people to be educated on it more, it would help us out a whole lot more. It would protect the children more. A lot of times it's not neglect, it's poverty. So you have to be careful. So it's very good to be knowledgeable of it. So there are different maltreatments the law defines as abuse or neglect, but you have to know the different levels in order to know whether a child is being abused or neglected.
That was a great breakdown between the two, neglect and abuse.
That's very brief. There's more, but that's just
a lot more behind it.
It's a lot more behind it, but that's the basic explanation of the difference between physical abuse and physical neglect. We've been taught a lot of times that back in the day, older people, they say child neglect. That means the child is skinny, the child is not eating, the child just looks very pale, or something along those lines. That's not always physical neglect. I may go to a home and the child may look healthy, but there may be a leaking roof, there may be a roach infestation, there may be garbage and trash everywhere in the home. That places the child at risk. There may be steps that are missing on the home. The child walks down the step, the child could be harmed. It's just different. It just depends on the situation itself, and there's the law, and then there's case-by-case situations where people just can't do better, and you have to do what you got to do to kind of help them to improve.
So, and not once again getting too personal, because I know some things you can't talk about. But how? Say if I have a neighbor and I notice that the child never have shoes on, the child never have decent clothes on, is that giving me a right to call someone about, if I'm thinking that's child abuse or child neglect, is that a reason to give you all a call? Like, what reasons?
What would trigger?
I mean, I don't know how to.
Well, I think I know what you're asking. This is what I tell people.
Because you don't just want to get any kind of phone calls. Like,
we get them. If you're not sure, always call. It's better to be safe than sorry. But something is, if it's your neighbor, the scenario you gave, if it's your neighbor, and if you have that rapport with that person, if you see the child the child doesn't have on shoes, the child is not dressed appropriately for the weather, certain things, then maybe you can go to that person and talk to that person. Now, if you try to talk to that person to avoid having to make a report, I would always suggest talking to the person first and say, well, I noticed that little Johnny doesn't have on shoes when it's raining outside, or I noticed that he has on the same clothes for days, or I notice that he's outside at 2 a.m. in the morning and I don't see anyone supervising him.
Yeah.
Something like that. Now, the obvious things you want to report. But if you don't know, it's always best to call and let the agency do their job and screen it out.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not sure, you just call and report what you directly observed and let them be the ones to say, well, yes, this needs investigation, or no, it does not. That way it kind of releases you of that burden of knowing that a child could have been placed in danger and you didn't do anything about it.
Now, how confidential is that? Like, if I call on someone, like, would you all release the name of that? I don't think y'all would do that, but this is a question. Like, if somebody have a neighbor or someone that they know, a church member, whatever, and they think that the child is being abused or neglected, you won't release the names, right?
Under no circumstances do we disclose who the reporter is. And they even give you the option to have a call back once the investigator makes contact with the family. They'll ask you, would you like to have a phone call back or just a follow-up phone call from the investigator, and you can either say yes or no. But you can make a report anonymously.
Okay.
You don't even necessarily, we like for you to leave a name and a number, because if you're that concerned about the child, we want to kind of keep you up to speed and keep you up to speed on how the investigation is going. Now, there's certain information we can't share because of confidentiality and privacy laws, but we can do basic minimum information sharing.
Okay.
So, but the reporter can remain anonymous. The reporter does not have to leave a phone number if they don't want to. The reporter doesn't have to even want to call back. But it just helps out a whole lot whenever we can have that interaction with the reporter. And we don't disclose who the reporter is. Most times they know who the reporter is. We just can't confirm or deny that the reporter is the person they're speaking of.
And I asked that question because there could be a lot of people out there that's kind of scared to make that phone call because they don't want to get involved, but like you said, if you have that feeling, you should make that call, because you never know if that child is really in danger. Like, they should make that phone call.
You should make the phone call, and once again, they don't take your driver's license number, they don't take your social security number, they just ask you have the option to remain anonymous or not. Personally, I found that when I know who the reporter is, it helps me with my investigation a whole lot, because sometimes they can be malicious phone calls. We do have neighbors making malicious calls on their neighbors, or we do have maybe custody battles. And the easiest way to get through those custody battles, a mediator. And so it just helps out. The more information you have, the better off you can kind of get your investigation propelling forward and hopefully make a case decision. But the investigations are very thorough. The investigations are not long, but long enough for us to build up enough evidence to prove or disprove whether or not the allegations are true. So it is very important that if you're not sure, it's better to err on the side of caution.
Going back to what you said about malicious reports, so that's like if someone just calling just to be mean, just like, oh, I'm gonna get her in trouble, or I'm gonna get him in trouble, I'm gonna make the phone call and say that they doing such and such. How do y'all handle that? Because that gotta be that have to be a process as well. Like, you have to go to that person's house and do a report, and then you're gonna find out it's false claims, like false.
We treat every report the same, whether it sounds bogus, and we treat them all the same. We don't if it sounds bogus, we can't just say, oh, this sounds bogus, we're not gonna investigate it thoroughly. We have to go regardless, and that's what we explain to people. They say, well, I know who made this report, and I understand, Ms. Doe, that you understand who made the report, but we're kind of bypast that point. This is what they're alleging. So if you know it's not true, I just ask for your compliance in the matter. So, the best thing to do is just to comply with the caseworker. Be upfront with the caseworker.
Because the truth will come out.
The truth will eventually come out. If we do our job like we're supposed to do, we're gonna find out. It's our job to meddle. We get paid to meddle. We get paid to prove or disprove what's being reported.
You all get to be nosy.
We get to be we get to be nosy. Yes, we do. And I'm gonna sit my tea on that.
Okay. Me too.
Yes, we do.
But that's a good thing.
But But you asked the question, what do you look for?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, anything involving drug usage, you definitely want to report it. Anything involving a child that you know is not of age is able to, what we call, self-protect, and that child is kind of unsupervised and out wandering. It depends on how they're dressed. It depends on the weather conditions. It depends on, who's around, their environment, inside and outside. Certain things you just automatically know. Anytime you're involving drugs around minor children, you want to report something like that. Anytime, there's domestic violence, you definitely want to report that, because it can start out as a simple argument and it can turn very physical, and minor children can be present.
Right.
And they can be harmed emotionally, they could be harmed and possibly harmed physically. Mm-hmm. So you definitely want to report anything pertaining to domestic violence, anything involving someone driving under the influence with the child in the car. Something as simple as a child not being in a car seat.
Right.
In a car. That's just a scenario, just an example. But if you don't know, you're not sure, the best thing to do is to just call and let those people that are in position do their job, and make that decision, and you don't take it upon yourself to say, well, no, this is not abuse or neglect.
Right. Now, as far as the children go, like, what advice would you give a child who may be watching? Mm-hmm. What advice would you give them if they're in a home where they're being abused, neglected? What advice would you give to them?
Well, that's a lot of advice I would probably give to them, but the main thing is every child should be in school. Okay, so if you are being abused or neglected, or usually if they're not able to understand what those words mean, if you feel like you're being bullied by an adult, if you know that if a caregiver or a mom or a dad is supposed to love you, but you don't necessarily feel love because of the way they physically harm you, or if you feel like you're having suicidal thoughts because of how you're being treated, the best thing what I would tell them to do is to talk to a guidance counselor, report it to a trustworthy adult, talk to a principal at school, maybe tell one of your teachers at school, but always just be honest about what's happening in the home, and don't feel that no one's going to believe you, because if you tell one person they don't believe you, then tell someone else. Right. If you tell a second person they don't believe you, then tell someone else. You keep telling until somebody believes you.
Right.
So
no matter what that person in your home tell you, they don't tell, or this going to happen to you.
Yeah, we have a big stigma. What goes on in my house stays in my house. I agree with that to some extent, but if a child is being abused or neglected, or if a child is being mistreated, or they don't have food to eat every night, they don't have running water in their home, if there's a concern of any kind, then that child definitely should report it to, some schools have SROs. And that's pretty much the police officer that monitors the safety of the children. Right. SRO, tell it to a guidance counselor, tell it to a principal, or just a teacher. Tell someone. A lot of times, they report it to their friends, and their friends love them enough and care about them enough to tell their parents, and then it happens that way. Right. So just tell someone. Don't be afraid. We'll do whatever we have to do to make sure you are protected at all costs.
Right. Well, Carron, thank you so much. I think I do have one more question. If someone noticed that a child is being harmed, what is there a website? Is there a number? Like, do you have any of that information with you where they can call? Nope. I take that as a no.
Well,
911.
You can well, in some cases you can call 911. Because they are mandated, police officers, law enforcement are mandated reporters. But if you feel a child is being abused or neglected, you can call 843-519-0170. And no matter where you're at in South Carolina, if you call that number, it's going to direct you to whatever intake hub, whatever county you may be in, whatever region you may be in, whatever the case may be. But there is a 1-800 number. I don't have that number right off, but if you go to your local Google search engine, you can put in how to report child abuse or neglect, and it will direct you there step by step.
Okay, well, that's some good information. So if you or someone know of a child that's being neglected or abused, make sure you call the number that Carron gave out, and of course I have it at the bottom of the screen, and also use that Google to find out how to handle a situation like that if you know of a child that is being abused or neglected. All right, guys, Carron, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it. That was some great information.
Thank you.
Yeah, some great information. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching Tangy Tea of Life. Don't forget to go to our email address, tangyteaoflife@gmail.com. Leave topic suggestions. If you would like to be a guest on the show, let us know right there on our email address. Please leave comments below, and thank you so much again for watching. Until next time, bye.